For 300 years, humanity had been the youngest member of the Galactic Council. They joined in the year 2847, full of hope and excitement. The stars had always called to them, and finally they had answered. Humans believed they were entering a golden age of friendship and shared progress with alien species. They were wrong. The Galactic Council was made up of 12 ancient species, though with their silver skin and cold logic led the council. The massive reptilian warriors provided military strength. The small and clever handled trade across 10,000 worlds. Each species had their place, their role, their importance. Humans were told they would find theirs too. But from the very first day, it was clear that humanity was seen as something lesser. Ambassador stood before the council chambers for the first time in 2847. She remembered the whispers that echoed through the great hall. The representative had looked at her with those empty silver eyes and said words she would never forget. He called humans primitive. He called them children playing at civilization. The other species laughed. Some of them actually laughed, kept her face calm and her back straight. She represented all of humanity, and she would not show weakness. The years passed and things did not improve. Humans were given the worst assignments. They were sent to patrol dangerous space routes that no other species wanted. They were tasked with mining operations on toxic worlds. They were asked to solve problems that had defeated other species for centuries, and they did it all. Every single time humanity delivered. They thought their hard work would earn respect. Instead, it only brought more demands. The turning point came in the year 3147. 300 years of service, 300 years of sacrifice, and humanity received nothing but contempt in return. They had started a border war with a species called the fighting was brutal and bloody. Millions died on both sides. The Galactic Council needed someone to negotiate peace, but no one wanted the job. They were known for killing diplomats. So naturally, the Council turned to humanity. Ambassador was selected for the mission. He was young, brilliant, and genuinely believed in the possibility of peace. He traveled to with a small team. For 6 months he worked tirelessly. He learned their language, understood their grievances, and slowly built trust. Against all expectations, succeeded. He negotiated a peace treaty that ended the war and saved countless lives. When he returned to the council, he expected some recognition. What he received instead changed everything. The claimed credit for the peace. They said their strategic guidance had made it possible. They said their military pressure had forced them to negotiate. They said their trade restrictions had weakened the enemy. Not a single species mentioned humanity's role. When tried to speak, he was silenced. When he presented evidence of his work, it was dismissed. The official record stated that humanity had provided minor logistical support, nothing more. Returned to Earth a broken man. He had risked his life and watched 2 of his team members die. He had achieved the impossible, only to have it stolen from him. He was not alone in his suffering. Across human space, similar stories were common. Scientists whose discoveries were credited to other species. Engineers whose innovations were claimed by alien corporations. Soldiers who died in battles that were erased from history. Humanity gave everything and received nothing. The human government began to change. For 3 centuries, they had followed a policy of patience and cooperation. They believed that eventually the other species would see their worth. That belief died slowly, painfully, over decades of humiliation. A new generation of leaders emerged. They were not angry or vengeful. They were simply tired. They looked at the numbers, counted the costs, and made a cold calculation. The Galactic Council was not worth it. The decision was made in secret. There was no dramatic announcement, no angry speeches, no demands for justice. Humanity simply began to pull back. Trade agreements were allowed to expire without renewal. Military patrols were gradually reduced. Scientific cooperation quietly ended. Human ships stopped visiting alien worlds. Human ports began closing to foreign vessels. It happened so slowly that at first no one noticed. The Galactic Council was busy with its own affairs. The 12 ancient species had their rivalries and conflicts. They barely paid attention to what humans were doing. When trade numbers from human space dropped, they assumed it was a temporary economic problem. When human patrols disappeared from dangerous routes, the thought they had simply gotten lazy. When human scientists stopped sharing research, the belief they had nothing worth sharing anyway. It took 50 years for the Council to realize what was happening. By then, it was too late. The first crisis came from the trade networks. They suddenly discovered that 30% of their commerce had depended on human involvement. Human ships had carried goods that other species considered too dangerous or too boring. Human merchants had established connections with minor species that no one else bothered with. Human banks had provided loans to struggling economies across the galaxy. All of that was gone now. Trade routes collapsed. Prices skyrocketed. Economies that had been stable began to fail. Second crisis hit. Without human patrols, the dangerous space routes became truly dangerous. Pirates and raiders like a plague. Species that humanity had kept peaceful for centuries suddenly remembered old grievances. Border conflicts erupted across the galaxy. The military was stretched thin, trying to handle problems that humans had quietly solved for 300 years. They called for help from other council species. The help never came. Everyone was dealing with their own disasters. The third crisis was scientific. They had always dismissed human research as primitive. They had never bothered to look closely at what humans actually produced. Now, they discovered the truth. Human scientists had been solving problems that researchers could not crack. Human medicine had been treating diseases that other species thought incurable. Human engineering had been maintaining systems that kept entire planets habitable. Without access to human knowledge, progress across the galaxy ground to a halt. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. For the first time in history, all 12 species agreed on something. They needed humanity back. They sent a delegation to Earth, expecting humans to be grateful for the attention. They were shocked by what they found. Earth had changed. Human space had changed. Cut off from the exploitation of the Council, humanity had flourished. Their cities were cleaner, their people healthier, their technology more advanced than ever. They had spent 50 years investing in themselves instead of serving ungrateful masters. They had formed alliances with minor species that the Council had ignored. They had built a civilization that no longer needed the Galactic Council at all. The delegation was received politely but coldly. The new human ambassador was a woman named Sarah. She listened to the Council's demands with a patient expression. They wanted humanity to return to its old role. They wanted human ships back on dangerous routes. They wanted human scientists sharing their research. They wanted human merchants rebuilding broken trade networks. In exchange, they offered nothing. They did not apologize. They did not acknowledge past wrongs. They simply expected humans to obey. Ambassador's response became legendary. She did not raise her voice or show anger. She simply asked a question. She asked the delegation to name one thing that the Galactic Council had ever done for humanity. The aliens tried to answer. They mentioned allowing humans to join the Council. They mentioned giving humans access to galactic markets. They mentioned permitting humans to exist in galactic space. Smiled sadly. Allowing someone to serve you is not a gift, she said. It is an expectation of servitude. The delegation returned to the Council empty-handed. The 12 ancient species were forced to face an uncomfortable truth. They had never seen humans as equals. They had never valued humanity's contributions. They had only seen a useful tool, and now that tool had walked away. The fallout was only beginning. Over the following century, the Galactic Council slowly collapsed. Species that had cooperated turned on each other. Without humanity to handle the thankless tasks, no one wanted to do them. Without human mediation, conflicts escalated into wars. Without human innovation, technology stagnated. The great civilization that had lasted for 10,000 years crumbled from within. Some species reached out to humanity individually. They apologized sincerely, acknowledged their mistakes, and asked for genuine partnership. Humanity welcomed these species warmly. Together, they built something new. It was not a council where ancient species looked down on younger ones. It was an alliance of equals, based on mutual respect and shared benefit. It grew stronger every year while the old council grew weaker. The final session of the Galactic Council took place in the year 3302. Only 4 species remained. The others had left or collapsed into chaos. The representative, the last of his line, stood in the empty chamber. He had access to records from 300 years earlier. He watched the footage of standing tall while his ancestors mocked her. He watched presenting evidence of his peace mission, only to be silenced. He watched 100 similar moments of human dignity, meeting alien contempt. He finally understood what his ancestors had never grasped. Humanity had not been primitive. Humanity had not been weak. Humanity had been patient. They had given the Council 300 years of chances. They had offered friendship, partnership, and service. All they had asked for in return was basic respect. The Council had refused even that small thing. They stood alone in the empty chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of a civilization that had destroyed itself through arrogance. He thought about humanity, thriving somewhere among the stars, building a better future with species wise enough to value them. He thought about his own people, scattered and diminished, paying the price for ancient pride. He had one final thought before he left the chamber forever. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy out of anger. They had not sought revenge or demanded justice. They had simply stopped giving their gifts to those who did not appreciate them. In silence, they had pulled back. And in that silence, the Galactic Council had discovered just how much they had lost. The great chamber fell dark for the last time. The stars continued to shine, indifferent to the fall of empires. Somewhere out there, humanity was still reaching for those stars, still building, still dreaming. They had learned the hardest lesson the universe could teach. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. And sometimes silence speaks louder than any words ever could.